Good morning, everyone. My name is Janice. Welcome back to Stories That Inspire Us. I am your host for this amazing podcast. And I just want to say all my guests have been flipping amazing. Guess what? I have another flipping amazing guest on today. I'm so excited to welcome and introduce to the Stories podcast family, Amanda Karch. Amanda, welcome to the Stories podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
You're so welcome. Now, Amanda, I know that you are a published poet and an avid writer, and there's a lot of stories with being a published poet and a writer. So let's dive right on into it. How did you get started in this realm?
So I've always loved to write. I've been writing since I was a little kid, where I was making up all of these worlds and doing a lot of fiction writing. Never actually finished anything that I started writing, but I feel like that's also part of being a writer. So I was always writing, and then at some point in high school, it switched to poetry, which I'm still not really sure how it actually started or how I decided that I was going to write poetry, but it happened. And then it was kind of on and off for high school, and especially once I got to college, because life just gets so busy and you have so many other things that writing kind of fell off for me. But when the pandemic started and all of a sudden everything that I was normally busy doing, it was all stopped. I had so much time, and I was like, you know what? I've always had this dream of publishing a book. So I decided that now is as good a time as ever. So I realized that self-publishing was an actual thing. Don't think I knew it existed as an option before. And then I got started self-publishing my first poetry collection. That led to so many other things, and here we are. And I have kept up that writing habit since, and I don't intend to lose it anytime soon.
And that's flipping amazing. And there's that word again, flipping. When people go in, as you know, I'm a published author myself. I've done one of the co-authored projects was poetry, which was kind of a fluke for me. And I've always loved poetry. And the one question that somebody asked me was, why would you want to do poetry? But there's such a depth in poetry. Poetry really can mean very different things to various different people. So for you, was it a situation, obviously with your love for being an avid writer, was it, okay, this topic I really love, let me sit down and figure out if I could write some poetry about it? How does it come to you?
It's really strange because the inspiration comes at really different times. There's really no rhyme or reason behind how a poem starts. There can be times where all of a sudden I'm on a run, and then I have just this amazing idea for a line, and then I'm trying to keep it in my head until I get back where I can write it down, when of course it never ends up as good as you thought it the first time. But a lot of my writing comes from starting with free writes. So what I'll do, especially if I'm stuck, if I have writer's block, or I really want to write, but I don't have a topic in mind, a lot of times I'll just sit down and set a timer for 10 minutes, and I'll just write whatever comes to mind. The biggest part to me that I always try to keep in mind is to leave it free of judgment. So no matter what's coming onto the page, whether it makes any sense, whether it's relevant, no grammar, no punctuation, just kind of doing whatever happens. And usually somewhere along the lines, I either have a couple phrases or a theme that I realize has been on my mind recently. And then from there, it just kind of happens. It's kind of hard to explain how, creativity is such a fascinating topic to me. That's a whole other story, but it's so interesting how it happens, and it's just never the same twice.
And you make a very valid point there, because I know for me, when I sit down and write, whether it's for an anthology that I'm involved with, and I'm still writing my own book, it is a brain dump. And a lot of times, I'll just be sitting here working on a client project and something pops into my head, and then I, grab one of my little sheets of paper and just, for me, there's an association, obviously I'm on my computer all the time, so I'm typing and whatnot, but for me, it's more of a connection with the pen or pencil
Yep.
to the paper.
I fully agree.
And
I know
sometimes
so many people who write poetry like through typing. And I mean, I end up typing my poems just to organize them for submissions and stuff like that. But I feel like the first time that I want to write a poem, I want to write it by hand, because there is something really special about like the actual physical act of writing.
there is, and I think it's the creative connection to what you're feeling, or I call it the brain dump that is happening for me. Sometimes, for instance, as we're having these conversations on the different podcasts, you might see me, doing one of these, and I'm scribbling, and I brain dump, because I'm like, oh, okay, well, here's the next question that I want to ask. Here's what I want to go back to.
Mm-hmm.
Now, mind you, sometimes I can't read my own handwriting because I'm,
Yep.
but anyways, that creative connection, and it could be something as simple as, you said that you love to run. And I know for me, a lot of times when one of my favorite activities is kickboxing. So when I'm kickboxing, I'll have these thoughts and I'm like, oh, and I run to my desk because my bag is right over there, and I'll, write something down real quick. Sometimes I can't do that. But, retaining it up here, I'm like, as I'm punching or kicking the bag.
Yeah.
Sometimes it gets lost in translation, and that's okay. And I think the thing with writing too is, as you mentioned, which I think is really important for anyone who wants to sit down and do an article, write poetry, is to be non-judgmental. Let it just flow. And then from there, maybe it's just something as simple as getting up for 5-10 minutes, and then you come back to it and you look at it and you're like, oh, okay. And then you go ahead and finish it up. What has, now, obviously, I know that you've published a few books. What has that been like for you? Because I know for me, it's even after 16 co-authored projects, it's really exciting.
Yeah, publishing my books was such an amazing process. They were both so different, but they really just did so much for me. I mean, before I self-published my poetry collection, I had really never shared my writing with people. I mean, again, like going back to like the whole judgment part, I was always afraid of judgment of people reading my work, because I mean, poetry is usually so personal that I just didn't know what people would think. And so I could count on one hand the amount of people who had ever seen my writing before. And I mean, poetry is something that I love. And the fact that I never really talked about it or shared it with anybody kind of made me a little sad, because it's something that I was so passionate about and I was kind of just hiding it to myself. And I mean, yes, there are some things that still I will keep to myself because they're more personal, but it was sad that I was hiding my passions because of a fear of what other people would think. So publishing my books really helped me become a lot more confident in myself and really just finding my voice in general. I mean, I realized how much poetry had helped, not even just like writing and publishing my books, but just the physical act of writing poetry. It had helped me so much, like realize who I was and what I wanted to do. And it's kind of incredible. It's hard to explain sometimes, but I try my best.
And what, I have to tell you, I honestly love what you said about it comes from the heart. Like, think about that for a moment. You had a fear of hiding your passion, yet you're in the act of sitting down handwriting out what's coming to your mind, that's a passion.
Mhm.
And you stepped over that fear, and here you are, 2 books later, I believe, correct?
Yep.
Um, Girlfriend, like, you just got to keep on doing that.
Yeah. It's crazy. I mean, I've just gained so much confidence in the past couple of years that looking back at where I was at that point in time, it's crazy thinking about what I've done and what I'm now able to do. I mean, doing a podcast like this, that would have been unthinkable a few years ago. I even just like my public speaking in general and speaking up in school projects when I was back at school or presenting in front of people at work meetings. It's all it's all connected. I mean, it's really about finding my confidence. It's been a wild journey.
True story, finding your confidence. And when you said that you gained so much confidence, for instance, you never thought a few years ago that you would be writing, or much less be on a podcast. And I relate to that. I never thought that I would be a host of 3 podcasts. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, granted, one of them I do co-host with my sister, but I think about that in a way as, and there was a fear for me. Like, there was a very real fear of coming on live. And that's why when I started my podcast journey, I knew that I had to go on live. Obviously, I'm recording it to the cloud
Yep.
and it's going to be uploaded to different places. But for me, that was part of the creative process of sharing my passion, being able to show people I am not perfect, but I have a passion and I
Yep.
want to share it with you. And if it resonates with you, that is wonderful. And maybe that will inspire you to do something and create your own ripple effect.
Yeah, I mean, I can relate to that a lot. So when I started working on my poetry collection, I started an Instagram account to really start to grow my audience and have people to actually sell a book to. And so when I started doing that, I was super consistent with posting, partly because I had a lot of time because there's the whole pandemic, but I knew that like consistency was like a really good thing. And obviously in the last couple of years, the world's kind of figured itself out a little more. And then I've also gotten busier. So I know I've kind of fallen off with that. But I'm starting to really get into posting more, but I'm worrying less about like the perfection, like the quality. Not saying like I'm posting bad work because I wouldn't do that, but it's more of like posting some excerpts of unfinished drafts partially because I want to go on to submit those to literary journals and you don't want to have them published elsewhere before, but also just to show that like poetry is a messy process, but it's also where a lot of its power comes in. I think the whole process itself, going from an idea or just a free write to an actual like published and finished and revised poem, there's a lot that happens in between there, but I think that's where the greatest power is.
It certainly is. And it is a messy process. But in that messy process, and by the way, that should be one of your theme days that just came to me. Here's the messy process day. Thank you, Janice Malillo. No, there's nothing.
Yeah.
But it is messy because, even in my respectable age bracket, with what I do as a podcast manager, virtual assistant, and I do a lot of ghostwriting, it is a messy process. For instance, when I write for someone else, I have to step into that role, and there's always a little bit of fear with that. I'm not going to lie, because I'm writing as if I were them.
Mhm.
So I need to step in their shoes.
Yep.
And that can be a messy process,
Mhm.
even when you're doing it for someone else. But I love the fact also that you're being creative in such a way that you're being true to yourself. Like I see you, what I envision is this staircase that you've been climbing. And you landed, excuse me, you landed on the first landing, but you kept going, even though there was a fear. And that is the type of story with any situation that inspires somebody, to say, hey, wow, look at Amanda. I mean, she's doing what she loves. She's doing it such a way where she's honoring her journey. She's got a little bit of fear, but she's going for it. That says volumes.
Mhm. Yeah, I think a big part of the social media thing too is that not just for the writing community or the poetry community, but just social media in general, people put out these auras of just being perfect, and they have these like picture perfect lives. And even for writers, they like a lot, there will be some people who will just post all of the success that they're having with their books. But I think a big part of my journey was sharing the actual journey and the behind the scenes and the messy parts, because yes, I've had some success with my books, but I also have other books that haven't really sold as much. I mean, my first poetry collection, I'm really proud of what that one's done. In a couple of years, I've sold over 200 copies of it. And that's just from my own audience that I've built on social media and my networking and all of that kind of stuff. But my other book, even though it's like a different type of passion for me, it just feels different as a book, but that one hasn't had as much success in terms of sales. And I mean, I'm pretty honest and open with it, just saying that, okay, like not everything is great and perfect, but that's just a part of life.
It certainly is. But again, you're honoring yourself, you're honoring your journey with being creative in that process, sharing the journey, even though it's messy, like, well, here's a messy excerpt. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with this one.
Yep.
And I think that's people really relate more with the real and authenticity.
Yep.
Someone in the process that they're going through versus filtered type of posts.
Mm-hmm.
Or I know TikTok, the reels, and like there's so many different things out there. And let me tell you, this is all unfiltered because I forgot to put on my lipstick. And ever since I turned, well, no, that's a story for another time. And a little tangent there. But here's the beauty of being in this space right now, sharing your story, is that someone's going to be inspired what you're chatting about. And I have a really good feeling about this. It's going to be that person who's kind of sitting in the corner, loves poetry, and is like listening to this going, I'm going to do something about this. I'm going to share my passion. How does that make you feel, knowing that you've inspired others?
It's an incredible feeling. I mean, like I said, even if I don't sell a lot of books, if I'm touching a few people, that people are inspired by my words, that they feel like it's relatable, that they've also been there, that they feel the same things, that's all that matters. I mean, it's such like a cliche to say, but it really is. Like it's an incredible experience to have people read your books and be inspired, or think that it describes their life, or it makes them want to do something about their lives too. It's indescribable, honestly.
Absolutely. As you look back at your different writings, as you look back at your poetry, is there one particular passage that you're like, oh my God, I love this paragraph. I love this piece of poetry because? What would that be for you?
So, I mean, my entire first collection of poetry is a book of love poems. So I can remember where, like, when, why, how, like all of the behind the scenes of the majority of those poems, like when I thought of the first idea or when a line came to me or what the moment was about. So I would say, like, honestly, that entire collection means so much to me. And I I know that my writing has definitely changed a lot since I wrote that book. I mean, my style and the way that I write poems is definitely different. I've grown a lot as a poet since then, but there's something about it that's always going to hold a very special place in my heart.
Right. And I imagine that it would be very hard to say, look back at your poetry and say, well, this is the one thing, yeah, that I always go back to, because it's all very personal. It's
Mhm.
all very relatable. And when you relate in a way, again, that honors your journey, you're inspiring others. I I have to agree with you. For instance, as I said, 16 times co-author. I can't say that I like one thing better than the other, but what I can share is when I've received emails, from people around the world, that whatever I wrote in a specific story inspired them to do something. And it's not that the story, it's not what I was sharing in the story, it was how that person perceived it and how they related to it and took action in their own lives. So I totally relate to that. What type of things do you think are down the road for you? In other words, I honestly see you doing almost like a I don't know, a little seminar with a few people, maybe sitting down to write poetry. Do you have anything in the works like that?
So I actually just led my first workshop a few weeks ago
Awesome.
through a nonprofit called Empower Her Voice. So it was a really intimate workshop. It was with, I think, 3 or 4 girls. So I really liked how, like, intimate and small it was, because it meant everybody got a chance to share their poems and really, like, form this connection, which I think is really powerful in terms of poetry workshops. So I would love to do something like that again. It was a great experience. I mean, I was definitely a little nervous for it because, it's the first thing I've ever
Mhm.
done in that kind of realm, but I definitely hope to do more like that in the future. But in terms of other things, I definitely have I always have book ideas in my head. I just don't have time to execute on all of them. But yeah, I mean, I've got a nonfiction idea swirling around. I definitely have a couple poetry collections in the works, or in my head at least. But right now, I think my main focus is trying to get published in a more traditional sense. So
Mhm.
submitting to literary journals has been a big goal for me this whole first half of 2022. And I have had a couple successes so far, mostly a lot of rejections. I mean, after I'm done with this podcast today, that's my plan for the day, to do a lot of writing and submitting, because the past couple of months have been very busy and haven't submitted a lot. But really trying to build my resume in the literary world is kind of the overarching theme.
That is amazing. And I just want to say about the rejections, I know about the rejections. And I think that's also important just to
Mhm.
cover a little bit. Rejections lead us to the correct yes.
Yep, I
And
agree.
that's the way that I look at it.
Mhm. Yeah,
It
for sure.
I think when we get those rejections, it's like, no, 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 don't go there. That leads you down a different road. It may not be how you planned it, but that's the beauty of what we do as writers. That is so amazing. Amanda, how can our viewers and listeners get a hold of you?
So I'm mostly on social media through Instagram and Twitter. So at AKK Writing. And my website is where you'll find the rest of everything that I do, my books, links to other podcast episodes I've been on, features, etc. That's akkwriting.com. So really, if you just remember AKK Writing, you can find basically everything you need to know about me and my writing. So yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Oh my gosh, I have so enjoyed this conversation today, and I hope you definitely will consider coming back again.
I would love to. I really enjoyed being here. Thank you so much for having me.
You're so welcome. Folks, today's chat was really truly from the heart about the desire to share your passion with others, whether it's through, in this case, writing, specifically poetry, and being an avid writer for Amanda. Let the words on what she has shared with you resonate with you. Maybe it won't be the same thing, but let them resonate in a way that lets you share your passion with others. Oh my gosh, this was a great podcast. My name is Janice, your host of Stories That Inspire Us. Today, I was inspired by this amazing young woman, Amanda. We hope to see you again very soon. And remember, if you have a story to share, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great day. Bye for now.